To start recording. Hi, everybody. This is Molly Murrah. I'm the current president of Northwest Watercolor Society, and I want to welcome you to the 81st Annual International Open Exhibition Reception with our esteemed juror and workshop instructor, Thomas Schaller. Thomas really stepped in and helped us out. We had another well-known artist scheduled to do all of these activities this month who had to step out at the last minute, and Thomas was free and decided to come in and help us out, and we just couldn't be more grateful. I can't tell you how excited we are to partner with him during all of this week and for these activities. His workshop starts on Monday. We have our general meeting on Tuesday night where he will do a live demo. So this is just an exciting week, and you're going to love every minute of it, I'm sure. So the first thing I want to do is just pour yourself a glass of wine and get a libation of some kind and sit back and enjoy this program, because it's going to be a fun one. It's a beautiful show. Thomas picked some of the most extraordinary art and made a statement before we even came on the air tonight that he thought this was the hardest show he had ever juried because of the quality of the work. So yeah, you're in for a treat. Before we get started, I would like to, there's a, you know that expression, it takes a village? There's a whole village of people I need to personally thank for their participation in allowing this show to take place and be such an extraordinary event. Mike Thorson and Alicia Harvey were the co-chairs of this show. Mike Thorson was the lead chair, and he was also the lead chair of the Waterworks show that we had 6 months ago. And Mike will also become president of Northwest Watercolor Society in June. So Mike is a huge contributor to the society, and we couldn't be more grateful. Peggy Myers, who is our chat monitor and who you've been listening to for the first 10 minutes before we actually started the webinar. She's my chat monitor extraordinaire, and she also, for the first time, took over the exhibition digital curator job. And we had 573 paintings entered into this show, you guys, and this was her first year doing it, and she handled all of them beautifully. And then we have Debbie Hagman, who is our Northwest Watercolor Society database administrator. And I don't know what to say about Debbie, except that she's been in the organization, an active part of the organization for many, many years, and is sort of like the heart, because everything that she does feeds every other branch of this society, because she manages our data and our database and our member list and our mailing list and all of that stuff that allows us to communicate with all of you. She manages it all. So Debbie, invaluable person. Then I'd like to thank Debbie Roscoff and Jody Steele. Debbie Roscoff is our website liaison, our board website liaison. And Jody Steele is our webmaster. And I don't know if many of you spend a lot of time on our website, but it's beautiful. I think we have the best art society website out there. And some people think it's very complicated, but it really isn't. Just spend some time on it. Take an hour, sit down with a glass of wine one night and look through the website. And there's so much on there that's so valuable and that you can learn so much, because our mission is to educate artists, right? That's our mission. And that's what we spend all of our time doing. So go to the website, check it out. You'll find amazing stuff on there. Shirley Jordan is our current treasurer. She stepped into the role of treasurer this year. She and Peggy actually switched jobs. Peggy was the treasurer for 11 years, and now Shirley's the treasurer. Shirley was the digital curator, and now Peggy's the digital curator. So she had to process each and every payment that came in, and she did a great job. So thank you, Shirley. Christy Galindo Dyson was our awards chair, and she did a spectacular job of gathering all the awards, getting them donated from the various donors, packaging them up, and she will be sending them out as soon as the awards are announced tonight. And then we have Sarah Love, our publicity chair extraordinary, who really is a professional PR person, and her amazing social media team, which consists of Liz Hauser, Joe Story, and Dina Popokina. So, and myself. I'm part of this team too, because I have a lot to do with the shows. So we have a lot of people who work together as a team to make these events happen. And that was just one event, you guys. So if any of you would like to be part of this amazing team, come on board at any time. There's always something that you can do, and we'd love to have you. All right, so Peggy has been introduced. I guess everybody can see you. Peggy, can you unmute and just say a few words so people can see you on the screen?
I'm here, and I will be gathering the chat questions and probably holding them off till the end to ask questions, unless there's an item where if somebody can't hear, can't see, I'll try to address those. So just if you have questions, put them in the chat. I will get them together and we'll ask Thomas at the end of the presentation.
All right, great. Thank you, Peggy. And now I'd like to introduce Mike Thorson, again, the lead exhibition chair for this International Open Exhibition. And Mike, why don't you say just a few things?
Well, thanks again, Molly, especially for the kind words. I appreciate that. On a personal note, I'm going through a bit of the father of the bride thing here right now. So I've had to do a lot of pacing and perusing my mind to come up with a few things to say about a lot of events. So tonight's event is quite extraordinary as well. This wedding last night has set me a little bit aside, but it was a wonderful experience. But tonight's experience is going to be a marvelous, it just shows this marvelous worldwide reach that we've discovered with this online community now. The show is a wonderful example of the human condition, lots of different aspects of the world, the abstract work, all of this is really, well, enough of my chatting. We'll let our juror go through the show with you, and please enjoy. And I'm anxious to hear some of his thoughts as well, because it's an extraordinary show. Thank you all for entering.
Thank you, Mike. I'd like to do just a little short introduction of Thomas. And then we're going to ask Thomas a couple of questions that we sort of started as a tradition last year. And but first, I'd just like to tell you a little bit about Thomas. Thomas is an award-winning artist, architect, and author. He has authored 3 books and is demand worldwide, as in demand worldwide as a speaker, author, exhibitor, instructor, and juror. Tom's work is collected worldwide and is part of many permanent collections, including numerous museums and private collections. He's a signature member of too many arts organizations to even mention, including our own NWWS. And Tom was recently elected to the International Masters of Watercolor Alliance, which is a huge honor. We're very grateful to be working with Tom on all of our open exhibition activities, which basically take place during this month of October. And so, Tom, a couple of questions. As we did last year, here they are. What is your most important criteria for judging an entry into an exhibition?
Great question. I first want to just get off a very quick thank you to NWWS for even bringing me on board. I'm very, very happy to help. I feel like it's part of my extended family, if I'm honest. I've been a member for a long time, and it's not a duty, it's a joy, because the people are just fantastic. And I am a member of a zillion arts and watercolor groups, but I gotta say, and I'm not just saying this, NWWS is one of the most, if not the most, engaged, because they care about arts, but they care about artists, and they bring arts, education, and artists together to make something unique that doesn't exist exactly anywhere else. So I'm always thrilled whenever I have anything to do with this group, because it is unique out there. Judging work is an honor, of course, but it's extremely difficult. I'll try to make my comments as brief as I can. I will say I do not necessarily or obviously gravitate toward work that's like my own. I honestly respond more to work that's not like my own, because what I love about watercolor is the breadth of expression possible. I've always found, since I was a kid and first picked up that brush and stuck it into water, it was an electric charge that connected my imagination to a piece of paper instantaneously. And through all these years, nothing has changed. It's that electric jolt. And as I've gotten older, I found fancier language for it, but I don't know if I need it. I think that's it. The artistic impulse, the intent of the artist, whatever it is that makes you want to get up and off the couch or wherever you are and do a painting, that always comes through in a successful work of art. So I do have 4 criteria. I'll run through them quickly. Intent is the umbrella under which falls everything else. After you have an intention for a work, the composition of shapes that support that intention, the value range and the value design that helps support that composition. Last, but certainly not least, the colors that help carry the emotional weight of that narration and that composition through. So I don't care if you paint abstractly or in still life, if you're a photorealist, landscape artist or architectural, whatever it is you love to paint, those are the things I look for. It's that electric jolt of the intent of the artist that always comes through and carries the day.
Wonderful. That's great advice. So keep that in mind, everybody, for your future entry proposition. So second question, what advice would you give to an artist who wants to start entering shows?
It is great advice. I think we're afraid of it. I painted all my life. I never entered any competitive art show until 2010. I wouldn't do it. And I lied to myself, didn't know I was lying, but I wasn't being fully honest, I guess. I said, I don't need other people to judge me. I know when I'm doing good. I know when I'm doing bad. Yeah, maybe so. But when I started to enter work, I got over this sort of ego hump, this hump of ego. Once you get that first rejection letter from a big society, even a smaller one, it's painful. I know, I've got a stack of them. But you know what? Life doesn't end. If you still want to paint after that happens, that tells you something. And what I gained was something I didn't expect. This, a community of artists. That's why you should enter shows. Not to be better than somebody else, not to necessarily win awards, although that's great. It is great. But the community of artists and artistic intent, once you're part of that, there's no going back, not for me. So of course, I love to get accolades, we all do, but I also think we're also our own worst judges. We're harder on ourselves than anybody else could ever be. So my advice to anybody thinking about entering it, do it, but do it for the community and for the sake of art. Don't do it for the pats on the back and the plaques on your walls and the awards, although nice as they are, nothing can take the place of being part of a larger community of arts and artists.
Tom, you are so right. You are so right. I don't think I could love an organization any more than I love Northwest Watercolor Society, the friends I've made, and everybody says the same thing.
Yeah.
So the community of artists is the value, and it's where it's all at. That's absolutely right. So, all right, well, take it away, Tom. The floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you again. I do want to say also briefly, this was a beast of a show to jury. I do think this past year and a half, where so many of us had extra time, a lot of us used it wisely as best we could. People became much better painters. So I'm going to start my slideshow here. And hopefully everyone can see. Are we okay?
It's not showing, Tom. There we go.
Are we up?
No, it's not showing.
I see it here. I'll try it again.
There you go.
Sorry for that little glitch. All right. Thanks to Molly for all the hard work in putting this together. I can't even imagine what a heavy lift it was. So here we go. We're working backward in case anyone didn't know. So the award winners will be at the end of my presentation. So anyone who doesn't see their work, don't get nervous. We may have better news.
Tom, I think you're on the end slide. That's not the,
Really?
can you check to make sure you're on the beginning slide?
Yeah, I think maybe you're right. I apologize again. So while I'm futzing here, I want to congratulate everybody who, obviously everyone who was accepted for the show. But I also want to congratulate everybody who even entered the show. Just to put yourself out there is commendable and worthy of congratulation. So here we go at last. Oh. So Anne Abgott, I have seen Anne's work before in a similar vein. Each one is unique and different. The beautiful dialogue of cools and warms and such skillful ability to take realistic subject matter and present it in an almost abstract way is much more difficult, I think, than it even looks. Fantastic work. We do have limited time, and much as I'd like to go on and on about each painting, I'm really not going to be able to, so please forgive me. Again, in a different way, Gloria Allen's work here, Firm Foundation, is again, realistic subject matter, but treated in an abstract way. This kind of thing appeals to me because I study my work in abstract shapes of darks, midtones, and lights before I ever begin. So I'm always really thrilled when I see another artist in their own style who obviously does the same thing. This study of light and shades and the luminosity of the dark and shadowed shady areas is really something to study and from which to learn. What a beautiful painting. Tony's portrait here. There was so much outstanding portrait work. I feel like apologizing to so many artists who I could not include because of limitations of space, but this was so outstanding. The representational work is great, naturally, but just look at the light and that beautiful range of values in a controlled way. There's this beautiful dance between control and looseness that watercolor does so well that I don't think any other media can do. The luminosity in the clothes, the folds in the clothing, the light, the darks, and the midtones, all fantastic and all portraying a sense of life and light. Ying Hao Bao's work here is just breathtaking. Morning breeze. Again, a very realistic subject matter landscape, but the minimalist treatment, which carried through both in the representation of object, sure, but therefore, in keeping with what I was talking about earlier, intent in paring down the numbers of colors, narrowing the value range, everything is orchestrated together to create something truly beautiful that I think in less skilled hands may not have been. So, wow. So much amazing abstract work was included this year, including this one by Nell Bartlett. I always say, if I live long enough, I'll become an abstract painter, because as I said earlier, I study my work, even if it's representational first in abstract shapes. compositional shapes of darks and lights and midtones, and then to be able to bring that forward into a fully realized complete piece is a skill I think many of us don't fully understand, myself included. But this is a breathtaking dialogue of energies, of warm tones, cool tones, values, textures too, using the flat surface of the canvas of the paper to also carry texture is so inspiring and beautifully done. Well, yeah, jumping from that to this is just a perfect example of the expression, the breadth of expression possible in watercolor. This is somewhat representational, but in such an impressionistic way. Robin Basic, I believe is the pronunciation, Hanging Valleys. We all love color, I know, but I am the first to admit that I am learning always about the strength of color. Color is value when you place it on pure white paper, but to be able to have the skill to use color as value to carry a narrative and an emotional weight through, as this painting does, is a difficult task. I really am a bit in awe of how well this works. Yeah, it's very, very beautiful, but deceptively difficult painting, I think, to pull off. It's just great. Here we go again, a completely different way to paint, completely different handling. Marnie Becker's State Street Kitchen. Many things to admire about this. Again, the minimalism, the freedom, the fluidity, the transparency of shapes, the representational intent, but the abstract approach is something very few artists, I think, can do well, and it certainly is done well here. Also, I think it's a perfect example of one thing watercolor can do really well, which is to show that the power of the unpainted paper, the preserved white, is just as powerful as the painted elements of the paper. So there's this really nice toggle in this painting between what's painted, what's preserved, between the positive and negative shapes. It's just an amazing painting. I'm so in awe of so many of these works. And here's yet another one. Richard Chow's very, very masterful portrait, young artist, highly realistic in approach, and yet there's something incredibly ethereal about it as well. The skill, this is something I try to do in my own way and try to teach my groups to do, to concentrate on knowing what the real intent of the painting is, what the real center of focus is. In this case, I think it's fair to say the subject eyes are so phenomenal, and then allowing the rest of the painting to gradually fade in the amount of delineation and in the amount of contrast he is, to center the focus right where you want it to be, just tells a world of narrative possibilities. Beautiful controlled palette, amazing skill, my God. Here too, another portrait, but so very different. Fang Yi Chen's Tranquility. This is very different because it shows a figure, but in context. This is something I try to do much less skillfully, generally speaking, but to show a person in their context so that no one element is less important than any other in a sense. So the darkness, the preserved lights, the cast shadows, the shades, the light gently falling across the child's face, all of it orchestrated so beautifully to make a cohesive presentation that sets a mood. So I don't want to speak for this artist, but to me, what this painting did was told me a story about a state of mind, an emotion, rather than necessarily exactly a portrait of a person. Though it may be very realistic, I don't know. But what I took from this painting was it was a beautiful rendition of an experience, of an atmosphere, of a feeling. Very difficult to pull off, I believe, and very successfully done. Oh, Hope by Yao Chi Cheng. Gosh, I don't know if I could love a painting more. This painting was one of the many, many, many masterful abstracts and semi-abstracts entered this year. Again, it is of something, as you can see. It's flowers, but it's so stripped down, so minimal, and allows the medium, the purposeful blooms, the negative space, the saved whites of the paper. The color is so scaled back. There's really, I mean, there's several colors, but there's two primary colors, the yellows and the violets, complements, obviously, that just sing off each other. It shows the power of using complementary colors and allowing them to mix on the surface of the paper. Again, something I do a lot or try to do, but rarely with this degree of success. It's just a wizard of a painting, and so lively and so much energy and movement and presence. So big congrats. So different. Jansen Chow. This is Winter Morning in Moscow. Again, quite realistic in a sense, in terms of replication of objects and buildings that many of us know, but yet very abstract and abstracted in its sense of coloration and a difficult composition. I talk a lot in my groups telling my students that your values, the darks, the midtones, and lights should all be there, and they are here, but each one should be in dialogue one to the other, and they should all connect. They don't have to physically touch, but they have to visually touch. So just here, look at the darks in this painting, how they, very few of them physically touch. They dance across the surface of the page, as do the whites, the lights, as do the midtones. Everything so complex and orchestrated to fit together like an intricate jigsaw puzzle into this just incredibly lively scene. Fascinating use of minimal palette and color, which is not always the way to go, but it certainly works here. The deep grays, the neutrals, and the yellow tones, beautifully orchestrated, which I think helps. Had this been more colorful, a more wider range of colors, I'm wondering if it would have worked as well. I think very smart, experienced painter that I know he is, I think knew to keep the colors to a minimum would help make this painting all tied together with this masterful dance of a range of values. So clever. Quilt Stories 6 by Deborah Kahn. So much to admire here. The figure, the fabric, the folds in the fabric, the subtle colors, the delicate dance of cools and warm tones, the saved whites, the folds in the cloth. Technical skill alone would have probably made me want to include this painting. But beyond that, for me, what won me over was the difficulty in this perspective, the foreshortened figure, very, very difficult to make work successfully. But really what I'm getting at is, to me, overall, overarching everything is the intent, the narration, the story of this painting, the way a mood was set. And I think by the choice the artist made to use subtle, subdued colors, even though there's a wide range of them, They're subdued and not somber, but thoughtful, I think, and moody. So I don't know what the subject is feeling or thinking, but you get a sense of it because of the artist's clever choice of perspective, of composition, and of these beautiful, subtle compliments that happen throughout the painting. It just sets a mood that to me represents what I imagine the subject was feeling and what the artist was thinking. Fantastic. Wow. Antonio Darden's Venice Laundry. He has done a whole series of these paintings. I know I've seen them around other places. They're spectacularly skillful, very different approach, very graphic. Nothing at all wrong with that. I think when you light upon a technique that you like, you look for subjects that work for that technique, or you work backwards to make the technique fit the subject. I happen to know pretty much exactly in Venice where this is. And the light there, the shapes of the architecture, the hanging laundry that's ubiquitous, the overhead wires that are everywhere. There is a sense of graphic. Everything seems carved out of light and dark and midtones. So I think this very regimented, controlled technique was really appropriate to the subject matter. And my God, did he make it work? The darks, the lights, the values, subtle colors again, just brilliant. Very, very clever. Sleeping on the Couch by Jim Deal. Again, it's same story in a sense, but different words, where the choice of colors, composition, tonalities, values, all set the tone. The choices the artist made all help support the intent that the artist had, where I assume the artist had. This beautiful dog sleeping on the sofa, a very homey scene, very easy to perhaps have done a less tasteful, cheesier version of something like this. There's something so profound about this painting and touching, because the artist did everything, every choice he made. The longitudinal, horizontal formatting really plays into the intent. The limited color palette, very soft tones of warms and cools, all in neutrals, and the very narrow value range, I think, slow the painting down, quiet the mood, settle the mind, and you almost feel as if you know this dog. You certainly want to reach out and pet him. It's just a really beautiful painting, but the choices the artist made, everything orchestrated together to tell the story. Yeah, just something I wish this is a painting artists could learn from, and I hope they do. Wow. Again, a little bit like the portrait I showed earlier. This is by Guanping Deng, a portrait in context, Xiao Mei. This is an interesting take on portraiture, one that I respond to very much. I love portraits of people. I really respond, however, to figural work when you show a person or a group of people in context, doing something, looking at something. There's an implied connection here between the figure and whatever it is she may be looking at, presumably the building beyond, and quite possibly the people inside that building. There's a narrative here that's not spoken, but it's implied. And that, I think, is what's masterful about this, besides the brushwork, this great use of values, again, subtle coloration. The draftsmanship is quite good as well. The handling of the fabric on her dress makes her look a part of the landscape and yet pulls her away from it. But what I really responded to was the dialogue set up between the figure and the subject, the figure and what I imagine might be happening inside that house she's looking at. I have no way to know that, but I'm just saying, to me, a successful work of art doesn't tell the viewer what to think or what to feel. It allows them to ask, what's going on? What's happening? What is she seeing? What is she feeling? What's going on there? It sets up this communion between artist and work of art that I think that's this ineffable relationship that a successful artist can do. I love how that's happening here. Only on Catalina, another great painting by Andy Evanson. Andy's one of these artists that, you know, this is an overused phrase, but he makes it look easy. I get that comment sometimes and I always sigh a little bit. I mean, I know it's a compliment, but of course it's not easy. Andy does really make it look easy. He's got such confident brush marks and such a purposeful, I believe, simplicity in his compositions. And yet nothing is harder than making something simple and homely, almost like this collection of this utility vehicle, this simple building, a couple of trees, background mountains, beautiful sense of light. Nothing is overdrawn or overly dramatic or theatrical here. And yet there's such a successful sense of mood, of place, of feeling to this that really only a master artist can pull off. I admire Andy's work so much. There's so much to learn in his work about saved white, about discretion in use of values and color, and about minimalism in terms of numbers of elements needed in a painting, nothing more. When to stop, I think, is something Andy could probably tell many of us about painting. Rarely is his work guilty of being overworked, as so many, mine included, sometimes are. Wow, Inner Twinkle by Alicia Ferris. It's just hard not to respond to this. I don't know who the subject is here, but you feel like you do. There's such a sense of presence, such a genuine twinkle in the eye. It's so masterfully done. Beautiful brushwork, amazing warm, cool dialogue happening. It's great sense of energy and life. Again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but when everything is orchestrated to carry the story of the intent of the painting, I feel the intent of this painting was to capture a sense of joy and life and youth and vibrancy. And so every choice Alicia, the artist, made, and the wider range of values in the brighter, slightly more saturated tones, in the loose, contrasted to the more controlled brushwork, everything is orchestrated to tell the story and to get it across. Then finally, what really won me over was the clever offset formatting, pushing the subject to the side ever so slightly and using the background to the left to balance out the placement of the figure's head. The cropping in general is really, really masterful. And it, again, looks simple. It is really not simple to do. But when it's done correctly like this, it all plays together to give yet another layer, a sense of energy, movement, and life that might have not been there in a more static, so-called typical cropping. Anyway, great use of light, the warms, the cools in the face. I could go on, but great painting. Water Fight by Amelia Fish. Very different way of painting that you often see, but I like it very much. I think it's a very valid way to paint. Just another illustration, of course, in watercolor, I'm sure in every other media too, but I think almost especially in watercolor, there's no one right way to paint. There's no one right way to apply paint. This style that's very graphic and minimal in a sense, I think suits this subject matter very well. That sense of light is so fantastic. What I assume is the end of a day. It could have gone badly, I think, had she made the sky much more dark or more saturated. Such a clever and skillful manipulation of the value range in this painting. I'm quite in awe of it, honestly. It's so different than the way I paint. But just the graphic cutouts of light, midtones, darks, subtle warms, subtle cools, the lively composition of the three figures on the dock, and again, offset composition. So their laughter, which you can almost hear, juxtaposed to the tranquility of the water that they're standing next to, and you imagine they're about to jump into, really sets up a compelling narrative. Oh gosh. Ari Foot, Radiance. This is a kind of painting I honestly can't imagine being able to do. There's great skill here. So much of my work radiates around saved whites of the paper because it's obviously the easiest way to inject light into your work. There's so very little saved actual white in this painting, and yet look at this luminosity, the vibration of the warm and cool, those fuchsia pinks and violets against those manganese and cobalt and other hues of blue. So sophisticated, complex, interesting. It's, again, an overused phrase, but one of those paintings you could stare at for hours. It's just quite compelling and amazing. And it does something I'm always searching for in my own work. It looks as if it's illuminated from within. Again, very different handling. A figure painting by Laurie Goldstein Warren, The Raven. Just so compelling. Again, the artist has selected a composition, an interesting, I think, really successful background. In my work in figures and portraits, I think they often fall flat because the backgrounds are wrong. The figure is, of course, the most important, but to do a successful composition of background elements, it has to all play together to enhance the portrait of the figure itself. And I think here that works. The deep tones, the saturated tones in the hair and the fabric, again, a very limited palette of earthy reds and dark, almost near jet blacks is really sets a mood that I think is very appropriate to the mood that the figure's face is putting off. She draws you in. You want to know what she's thinking, although you're a little bit scared to find out. And it's just a beautiful treatment and capture of mood and atmosphere. Another little thing to point out is the uplighting on the face and the hands and arms and the sort of double shadow cast against the wall. That is something I admit I never would have thought of, and I just think it's so clever. And again, could look, you know, a little overdone or unnecessary. But somehow in this work, it adds another dimension of meaning and mystery and wonder that might not have been there with a more traditional cast shadow. So really cleverly done. Wow, Blue Butterflies by Ji Gao. I adore this artist's work, but this painting, it's just so, you know, again, artist's choice, the intention, the sense of mystery, of narrative, of fantasy, of it not being real, even though realistic elements are composed here, obviously, this painting is very fanciful, very dreamlike, very mystical, very complex collision of shapes, textures, things, colors. The mastery that went into this work is beyond me. It's so fantastic. And again, it's one of those paintings that just makes you wonder. It makes the viewer, me in this case, ask, what's going on? What is she thinking? Not even so much what the artist was thinking as what is that figure going through? What is this all about? When a painting gets me to ask questions and spend that much time looking at it and asking, then I think you know it's done its job. I could talk for an hour about this. We don't have the time. Here again, another portrait. I'm kind of glad it came right after that because it's so different. Janine Helton's A Little Bird Told Me. There is this little hint of fantasy in this too. The bird horizontally sitting on the windowsill. But the dialogue between the bird and the beautiful rendition of the woman's face and her eyes in particular. I think what's happening here is, again, I keep saying this, but it's no less true. The artist's choice. After the intent is settled, the mood the artist wants to capture, I would imagine, everything else falls into place after that. The composition, the pushing of the figure off to one side, the inclusion of the little bird on the other, the empty negative space between the two subjects where you can fill in the blanks of the story being told. Beautiful brushwork, really subtle use of coloration. There are no real bright whites. There are no deep near black darks. But yet the value range works because of it. I think the dreamlike, subtle, quiet, peaceful story being told here, all of which is enhanced by the beautiful capture of the woman's facial features and expression. Fantastic. Again, another portrait, but again, the artist's choice. The title, of course, is Anne, That Smile by Maureen Henson. I apologize if I mangle your last name. Bronte, I believe. Forgive me, Maureen, if I got it wrong. But obviously, the artist's intent here is to capture this figure, this woman's smile. So everything in the painting radiates around that artist's choice, the intent, and then aptly named title of the painting. Everything else takes a bit of a back seat to this woman's smile. It's so masterfully done to be that minimal and to be that discreet with all the other colors and all the other values and the very simple composition of shapes. The cropping is expert, the simplicity of the background, just admirable beyond belief, all radiating around one simple and really profound idea: joy. The Survivors by Michael Holter. This is sort of an example of in a way, more classic watercolor treatment. But because it is that, everything in it has to be so well done and achieved and is. These kind of workaday scenes in work areas, construction sites, boatyards, etc., are rich ground for certain artists. I love them too, because they give you unexpected shapes and elements and tonalities with which to work. And these real interesting compositions of complicated shapes. I'm asked often what the hardest thing to paint is, and I often answer boats, because there's literally nothing on a boat that's a straight line. They're all curves, all shapes. And so the light dances around as it curves around the hull and the bulwark and the rigging, and the beautiful toggling he's got of darks, lights. These, I think, especially in this painting, the masterful use of midtones, which represent and display a beautiful handling of bounced, reflected, refracted light, is really admirable. All that said, the sky in the background could have been a mistake, if I can say that, if it had been darker or more dominant. He so masterfully played it down. It's very active. There's a lot going on, and it's a very important part of the composition, but it doesn't dominate. The boats in the foreground, as they should, dominate, and the sky, as active and beautifully painted as it is allowed to be painted out just slightly so that it falls spatially right where you want it. Oh, Mr. Hook. Bill Hook is one of these artists that is never ending in his exploration of shapes and relationship of shapes. I think I'm not out of school if I can speak a little for him and his fascination with buildings that are and constructed things that are in some state of repair or disrepair, things that are either coming together or falling apart. The deconstruction of building elements and other bits of construction fascinate him. This is an amazing painting, Bad News Seattle, showing two guys simply at work. But my God, look at this perspective, the depth, the treatment of what's not painted juxtaposed to that which is painted is not just clever. It comes from the hand of an enormously skilled and experienced painter. I often look at Bill's painting and say, oh, damn, I wished I had thought of that. And this is one of those paintings. Fishing Port Dust by Wei Junjin is so demonstrative of just masterful classic watercolor technique. There's so many individual bits about this. You could say, oh, look at this, look at that. The background alone, the way the mountains melt into the sky. One thing I love about watercolor is the way, because it's so fluid, one thing can become another thing. And because of that quality, it makes it possible for a skilled artist such as this to set a narrative and to tell a story in a way I think artists in other medias don't always do as well as a really skilled watercolorist. But the way the sky just becomes the background mountains, and the mountains then become that mid-ground bank of hills and buildings, and all of that just becomes the water, and all of that becomes the reflections, and then grows up into the boats, which are correctly a little bit more detailed and a little more explicit and a little bit more saturated in color. It's just a masterclass in watercolor treatment. Also, the sense of light is pretty faultless. Bev Joswiak's circle games. I'm so fascinated with Bev's work always, and have been for years, because she paints things that I don't, and that I honestly probably couldn't. She handles backgrounds in her figure work in such a confident, bold way. I wouldn't go there, and yet she does go there and makes it work, because she's so masterful and so skilled at balancing out the unpainted bits of the painting versus the painted, the darks versus the light. She composes her work in such a beautiful, abstract way that even the most figural paintings work on so many different levels. Her understanding of color too is beyond that of most mere mortals. So I'm always in awe of her. And I'm a big fan of painting on very textural, rough surfaced paper, whereas Bev is not. And I think it's a sort of another masterclass in showing why the choice of surface is so important. This kind of paper works for her, for the way she thinks, for the way she paints, in a very different way than it would for me or for another artist. I'm actually useless on hot press or smooth paper. And so I'm always in awe of those artists who make it work so well. Grandma's Love by Lina Knight. I mean, gosh, there's a million reasons, things I could talk about this painting. Obviously, the dialogue between the two figures, the negative space between the two positive shapes of the figures just holds, again, an unspoken world of emotion and narrative. Her hands, his face, and the profile of her face just make such a glorious composition. Colors, yes. Values, yes. Folds in the fabric, yes. But one thing I want to point out in particular in this work, after all that has been said, is when you paint figures and or portraits, it all can go south when you paint in the backgrounds. I've ruined countless such paintings. But look at this background. It takes its place where it wants to be. It's clearly a background. It doesn't add any extraneous information to detract from the narration. It provides this luminous, neutral, warm, cool, textural tonality that I think gives this subtle, quiet, hopeful, beautiful, solemn, not sad, but quiet space, negative space for the narration to occur so successfully. I really admire that. Great ability. Yeah, here we have a group of figures hanging out with friends and talking by Rebecca Kreuzinger. So different than the last painting because the narration, the intent, the story is so different on purpose. Had this been treated in a more subtle, somber way, it would not have worked as well. The brushwork, the aggression, the attack that she placed on this, the bold saved whites, the hard edges, the lost edges where they do you the most good, the harder found edges where they carry the most narrative weight. The very clever composition of these three figures are so energetic, and yet there's a bit of humor in a sense because they're all, of course, on their smartphones, really not hanging out with each other, even though they are. So anyway, there's so much to like in this painting. I was speaking in the last painting about the background, but look at this. It works just as well too, but she's used either a stencil or these cutout letters as if to sort of imply texting or the nonverbal language communication that we all go through these modern days. But she's used it as an element of the painting to add yet another sense of narrative and yet another layer of interest and energy that it would not have had otherwise. Well, I mean, here I'm keeping with a theme in a sense, but another portrait that tells a very different story. Veteran Day, My Veteran Day Award by Dong-Fing Lee. Here, again, the artist's choice of paper surface, I don't know, it might have been in my notes. If I've forgotten, I apologize. It's on obviously very smooth paper, perhaps Yupo, but I don't want to misquote if that's not true. But what I'm saying is the choice of your painting surface should not just be casual. It should be something you think about and do on purpose. Clearly, he has done that. It's really on purpose because the way the textures melt together and the way edges are purposefully obscured, I think would only work as well on this surface and not so well on another. We're looking at a veteran here. We can only imagine what he's gone through, what his experiences might have been, what he may be looking forward to or looking back on. Again, it's a painting that begs me to ask questions. I see this beautiful dialogue between his face, his hands, and what he's holding there. And it just makes me ask a world of questions of what he's been through, what is his life like? I think all of that is enhanced by the artist's choice. The background, as I mentioned, the paper surfaces I had mentioned, and then these kind of, again, I can't put words in an artist's mouth. I never want to try to, but what I'm picking up is these kind of shop-worn colors almost, these beautiful neutrals, warms and cools, sort of all orchestrate together to help tell the story of somebody who's obviously been through a lot. But look at the expression on his face. He looks hopeful, as if there's a lot more to come. So it's a very, very beautiful painting with a lot to say and a lot of questions to ask. Tales of Wheel, number 42, by Huang Lok. He's such a skilled artist. This is such a controlled painting in a sense. One comment I hear aimed at watercolor artists sometimes and meant as a compliment is, oh, you have such control over the medium. I know it's meant as a compliment and I take it as such when I get it, but what I hear in that is sometimes what's beautiful about watercolor is the fact that you can never have total control over it. It has a mind of its own. So what I love about my friend's painting here is the juxtaposition of clarity or so-called control, and then the lack of clarity and the lack of control from the foreground to the background. These two different worlds that are melded together with such skill. It's very bold to do a background like that with that much value and color and animation. But I think had he not done it, the saved whites and light of this rusty bike frame with its light and this beautiful woven basket, they would not have been as animated or as successful. So he really knows what he's doing. It works beautifully well. And I can't let this one go without commenting on the importance of composition and thinking about your cropping. This could have been a much more pedestrian painting if it weren't so aggressively and cleverly composed and cropped. The choice to show just part of the bicycle wheels gives a whole other energy to this painting. The abstract expressionists in the 50s talked a lot about their paintings reading beyond the canvas. And there's a hint of that going on here. It gives a certain energy beyond the edges of the canvas that sort of tells the story of a bicycle that's seen a lot of use and clearly has a lot more to come. Fantastic work. Oh my. Dream in Green, Stacy Lund Levy. Yeah, I just took one look at this painting and I just felt as if I dozed off into dreamland. Again, I keep saying this, but because it's just so true. When you have a good idea for a painting, when you have your intent settled, it just makes it so much easier for every other decision you have to make to design that painting to fall into place as it should. Clearly, her idea was to paint both a dream and a woman dreaming. It's very difficult, I should imagine, something I actually would love to try to do. But she's captured a sense of both the figure and the dream the figure must be having. To orchestrate all that sense of time, that span of time, if you will, into one composition is nothing to sneeze at. That's very difficult. Anyway, beautiful handling of composition of shapes, of both realistic and fantastic elements, all working together, weaving together into a really cohesive, beautiful whole that tells a story that just makes you want to take a deep breath and lie down for a few minutes. It's a really wonderful work. It's such a great idea. I go on and on and on with myself and my groups about just that. Think less about how you paint and more about what it is you're going to paint and why you're going to paint in the first place. When you have a good idea for a painting, everything else just starts to fall into place. Gosh, couldn't be more different. Spring Runoff by Joe McKechnie. This is water media. It's got a lot of saturation of tonalities and aggression in brushwork, which you could say would be wrong were he doing a different kind of painting. But this is a painting about moving water and little rivulets and falling water. So what could be more appropriate? Again, the artist's choice. Everything in this painting is orchestrated to tell that story of moving water. You can actually hear it. You can smell it almost, that clean water of a mountain stream. These clever, bold, confident choices of deep reds and bright greens in lesser hands, I'm sure could have detracted from this painting. But because they're so skillfully done, it all works together and just gives this bright, kinetic sense of rushing water. I go on and on a lot about the importance of thinking about your dynamic value range. Here, because you want a lot of energy being displayed, it's perfectly appropriate and right, I think, to get a very wide value range from dark darks to bright white whites. And then along with that, bright saturated colors, along with pure whites and deep darks. Everything works together to tell a pretty simple story, but in a pretty profound way. It's extremely well done. This couldn't be more opposite. Karen Mai, Dinner Time in Seoul. This tells a very different story. Another thing I love to explore, and I urge my groups to, and I interviewed John Salmon a couple of days ago, and he was talking about this too, but the value of looking at square formats. One thing they can do, and that's working here, is they slow the energy. They stop the viewer's eye from going off the painting left or right or up or down, and they center your view in right into the center of the painting. So they slow the energy down. That's a choice you can make before your brush ever even touches the paper. So Karen's done this here so beautifully. It just tells this story that's so mysterious. There's just representational items, but are just hinted at and suggested, and could so easily have been overpainted or overdone or overcooked. And it's just not. It's just enough is there. A beautiful bank of light above, casting this warm glow down below, offset with the beautiful blues and the shadowing above with their echoes down below, sets up this great dialogue between darks and lights between the two figures that are just coming out of the shadows, working away in a cafe or a restaurant. I don't know. And in a way, it doesn't matter. It makes you wonder what they're doing and what's going on. But the overriding effect I get when looking at this painting is just this beautiful mood of contentment, quietude, and concentration. Fantastic idea for a painting. Envious of good ideas for paintings, and that surely is one. Wow, a zebra close-up, and that it is, by Denise Marshall. These kind of paintings of animal portraits or close-ups can be a bit overdone or they often become, in my opinion, a little too photorealistic. What drew me to this piece was that it was not. It's quite recognizable, you know what you're looking at, but there's so much looseness in the brushwork. So there's this really nice variety and contrast between, well, contrast was the thing that got me. Obviously, it's a zebra. So there's this contrast between the light and the dark, the black and the white, but there's a contrast between the controlled elements of the brushwork and the areas here where she just allowed it to run and for colors and tones to run together and literally drip off the edge of the page. That takes confidence and commitment that is enviable. So the energy, any tightness or control is really around the upper part of the painting, around the eyes, beautifully handled, by the way. And then everything else in the painting is allowed to fade just a little, to run, to merge into the background, and very cleverly done. Overflow by Annette McGarren. This is a painting with a lot of control, and yet there are areas where she's allowed to do overpainting. I'm pretty sure this is a pour. I should know that. I am literally no good at such techniques, so I'm envious of those who can do them skillfully. They require you to work in reverse by masking out areas and painting over them. And so they really need to be planned and thought out. And to that end, they can look a little tight to me sometimes and overly planned. This one doesn't. It has a really nice energy between the areas that are controlled and those that are not. Beautiful fuchsias that just run over the top in the midsection, the areas of the painting in the center and lower portions and upper that are just ghosted out. So there's a path I read through this painting. All the lights connect in this path that just reads in this serpentine fashion from the top through the center down through the bottom of the painting. I think the choice of doing this as a vertical composition was very wise because it helps set up this unspoken connection between the top of the painting and the bottom, and it encourages the viewer's eye to travel along all these beautiful reds and complementary greens and darks and lights, and just weave your way through just the way you would if you were in a thicket of vines and overgrown bushes. So to me, the whole feeling, the whole experience of this painting seems very appropriate to the subject and then to the title. Oh, Phyllis Meyer, Remembering a Walk in November. Again, this is a kind of painting I admire so much. If I live long enough, I want my work to take somewhat a similar direction, because there are hint representational elements here, the stones, the trees, but of course it's really an abstract. Darks, lights, warms, cools, shapes, energies, positive, negative shapes, all orchestrated to hang together in this very clever, abstracted way that really does feel like a walk. She's named it A Walk in November, and you can feel that too in the choice of hues, coloration. It looks like a cold November wintry day. You sense this walkway that just pulls you on this little journey diagonally right through the painting. You're left to wonder in a good way what these shapes represent, what she was thinking, dreaming of, or remembering. It's just a beautiful way to think about and approach painting. Also, there's opaque and semi-opaque application here, which I love because it allows the artist to play with the texture on the surface of the page, which is something that's admirable when it's done so well as this. Really beautiful painting. So different. Bad News at Blinky's House by Gordon Miller. I love this work. It's so very different than so many, so very different than mine. I don't know what's going on here. That's what I like about it. Again, it asks me questions like, what the heck? What the heck is the bad news? But so that's what drew me in and made me stay. Then I look at the composition from a technical point of view. It's much more sophisticated than you might think. The simplicity of shapes, the way they're orchestrated on the page, and the way the angles are used offset, sets up all these different energies and connections throughout the work that really only a skilled artist would know how to manipulate so well. I'm loving the ground plane, those off green and green shapes. Of course, that intense red of the roof echoed in some of the figures coming down, sets up connections within the work. Very cleverly done. It's not an editorial type of illustration, which some people might say. It really isn't, because it's not explicit. It asks so many questions and has so much mystery and a little bit of off-kilter feeling, which makes you feel slightly unsettled and slightly curious as to what they're talking about, what's happening, who are these people. I hope Blinky is okay. I worry about him. Man, what a work this is. Ann Miller Stradu, Shadow Dancer. Fantastic figure work. Flesh tones are beyond belief. I could talk about that for quite a while. I won't, just want to mention it. But the shadowing, the luminosity in the shadows is something that's so close to my heart, difficult to do so well. The energy in this work, I mean, obviously this is a very mystical person engaged in a very important activity, but the artist's choice of the longitudinal horizontal format, I think, gives space, gives room for this figure to move into the negative shapes, left and especially to the right. So the choice the artist made to not do a vertical or a square, but to do a horizontal format, and the way the hair is painted in particular and the angularity of the shadows gives an additional sense of energy to this dancer that he already has, but that just enhances it and makes it stronger, as does this very clever background. The warms used pretty consistently in the figure are complemented beautifully with these greens and teals used expertly in the background, all in the horizontal dimension, directionality that just help add yet another layer of narrative and energy to this work that it might not have already had. Just fantastic. Oh, Sylvia Nager, The Silent of the Disappeared. This painting is very explicit, very intentionally controlled, very different than anything I would do. It's dreamy, mystical. It looks, I think, on purpose detached and metaphorical, probably. I don't know what's going on here. It asks me questions and I want to know. The figure's face, you can see beyond. I get a sense of a great passing of time in this painting. Opposite from the last painting, the elongated vertical format in this painting really helps tell the story even better, because it sets up this really obvious but beautiful connection between the shadowy ground area and the more luminous sky area up above. So you feel your mind and your spirit traveling a great distance in this painting somehow, and you wonder what the meaning is. The offset tree and the explicit definitive nature of the rendering of the branches is really not always the way to go. But in this case, it was absolutely the way to go, because there's so much to them that fragment this vertical format and almost make it read as if it's a stained glass window, that give it a sort of yet another spiritual sense to it. Well, what can you say about this? It's just so direct and in your face. Vicki Nelson, Chucks. I am a giant personal fan of Converse All-Stars. I probably have had 100 pairs in my lifetime. So yeah, I was personally disposed to like this, but I tried not to let that get in my way because it's a really great painting. There's something so lively about the brand of Converse, I think. They're just so direct as footwear. They're so no nonsense that I think the artist's choice to make a painting like that, where they're a bit worn out, they're a bit no nonsense, they're a bit scruffed up and dirty. They've obviously had a lot of life. Every choice she made, from the wide value range, the really darks, the really lights, the very bright reds, the energetic brushwork, all of it works together to tell the story of these beat up, most definitely beloved pair of shoes. Very clever painting. Oh, Woon Lam Ying's Don't Move, number 5. This kind of painting almost baffles me because it's so expertly composed. I'm always talking about setting up dimensional differences in the painting between dark, light, and distance to try to get a sense of perspective and depth. Yeah, and that's fine. That is one way to approach a painting. This is another way. It doesn't make me wrong or right. It just means it's not the only way you can approach a watercolor. This painting almost treats this representational subject matter, dog, people in a barber shop, and a sophisticatedly cartoony way, if I can say that. It's humorous, but yet very deceptively difficult to make this work, because there's so many values that are nearly the same that it almost dissolves from representation into abstraction. I think had it dissolved a little more, it might not have worked so well, but there's this really beautiful dialogue, I think, happening here between what you can, what is representational, what you can recognize, and what you can't. And then all the brush marks, the mark making throughout consistently across the surface of the paper helps tie all that together into a cohesive whole. And then this amazing palette of greens, purples, and yellows is, I can't imagine it being more successful in any other palette. Oh gosh, Carla O'Connor, 2020 vision. Uh, I love this painting inordinately. Just well, the story, the girl sitting in a wardrobe covering her eyes. I can't take it anymore is sort of the feeling I get. And I think most of us, at least once or a million times during the year 2020, felt like this girl must be feeling. I don't know that that's the story Carla was trying to tell here, but that's the question it made me ask. But on a technical level, what I loved about this was, in a way, if you squint your eyes slightly, it just looks like an abstract, beautiful painting of vertical elements marching across the page, from dark to light, to warm to cool. You don't even necessarily quite notice the figure at first. She's hidden skillfully amongst all the hanging drapery of all these intricately patterned robes or dresses. But of course, there she is. And it's all a symphony of colors and tones and textures and shapes that all works together. So again, I hate to sound as if I'm trying to speak for any artist. I am not. I'm just sharing with you my takeaway and what I thought made this a compelling enough painting to want to include. It's so well done, yes, but the story it helped tell was the sort of a pleasant chaos of all these colors colliding and crashing together. Again, and all the values, the deep saturated darks, the wide range of values, the lights, the darks, all clashing together, and her face covered, and you can't see her eyes, and just wondering what she's thinking. It's just, I know in a way, this painting made me laugh, and in another way made me feel kind of sad and mournful for what we have all been going through the last year or more. But it's a very emotional painting. Untethered, what a apt name, Jennifer Olson. Wow, here the artist it's just an explosion of imagination. This purposefully off-kilter perspective, these really unexpected and impossible scale changes between what's near and far and what's large and small. This bizarre, and I mean that in a good way, collision of warms and cools and shapes and elements. This painting could have easily failed, but it didn't, because somehow it all works together. And I think what works together in a more classical way is the orchestration of values. The light, the pure, untouched white reading through that open door, all surrounded with the darks and the midtones and all this beautiful collision of colors. All somehow is the fabric that weaves all these disparate elements together into this just fantastical painting. I really think in less skilled hands could have fallen apart, but certainly doesn't in Jennifer's. It's just an amazing bit of skill there, jubilation. Another painting that's just so joyful, Frog Parking Only by Charlotte Peterson. Obviously a very fantastical painting of tree frogs, one of my favorite creatures. So yeah, if you want to get on my good side, paint a tree frog. But anyway, frogs, you know, in a sense realistically, in another sense cartoonishly and metaphorical, and just so cleverly orchestrated. There's nothing unsophisticated about this painting, despite its joy and its almost childlike jubilance. In less skilled hands, it could have all fallen apart. But if you look at the warms, the cools, the energies set up by the verticals, the elongated horizontal format, and then all these diagonals reading across and through. All of this all hangs together into this incredible composition of darks, lights, and emotions. It's just so joyful. It's so much fun. But again, it's deceptively sophisticated. Found in Agios, Pavlos II, George Politis. Yeah, George, I know his work well. He is pretty darn masterful at taking realistic items and then composing them in really unexpected, unrecognizable compositions that just read as incredibly successful abstract works of art. These old bits of rusted machinery, the textural elements on them, the darks, the light. I think the brilliant choice to not paint or almost put zero paint on the background helps make this a very graphic and successful composition. I would just call it of energies. There's this dominant vertical energy offset beautifully with the horizontal energy, and then these serpentine energies reading through, and the diagonals this way and that. Not an easy thing to pull off because it could all just fragment and look chaotic. But he's, with discretion and editing, I believe, helped make all of these tensions come to some beautiful resolution on the surface of the paper. It's so admirable. Golden Harvest by Lisa Pope. I really admire this kind of work. It's so difficult, I should imagine. In a sense, it's photorealistic. It's 3 empty jars and the light shining through them. I don't know, but I think I know how difficult it is to get this to read through one element to something beyond. Again, remember, folks, we're painting on flat, 2-dimensional sheets of paper. So to get a sense of that much dimensionality, transparency, depth is just breathtakingly skillful. So much you could talk about in this painting. The background green reading through the glass, of course, is one that just takes my breath away. But if I had to just say one thing about the painting, I would say the fragmentation of the cast shadows on this unpainted white table or surface, the warms and cools, blues and browns and ochres of the shadow is literally breathtaking. It's got to be so hard to do. I don't believe an artist this skillful just takes a photograph and copies it. I think there's so much more going on here of editing, composing, planning, and skill at work. This is incredible. Oh, Jay Ryder, Early Fall. This is another one of those paintings that's so very different than anything I would or could do. But to get this much texture and this much different shapes, angles, energies reading consistently across the surface of the paper, top to bottom, left to right, is really a difficult thing to do. So I think what he has done is discreetly left much of the sky in the background almost nearly unpainted to allow it to remain the primary source of light. And then it's all this beautiful dance between the red leaves and the yellow and the green leaves and the slightly brownish leaves that give this piece such a lacy strength, which sounds contradictory, but I mean that. It's something watercolor can do when it's done right, is have both delicacy and strength at the same time. And that's on full display here. so beautifully composed and orchestrated. I can't imagine being able to pull that off. Wow. Charles Rouse, such an amazing painter. Morning Launch. There's just so much you could say about this painting, but if one word comes to mind, it is just this understanding of light, the discretion to leave most of the water in the background, even in the foreground, so lightly and largely unpainted is brave, actually. I think it takes a great deal of skill to know when and how to do that properly. This composition is so solid. This grouping of people in the boat, of course, in the lower right foreground is great. And they're so beautifully done, and the skin tones and the fabric and all, it's all so well done. But I think it's made even stronger by the negative shape of the almost untouched water beyond that beautiful sense of light. And then just the introduction of that little grouping of boats and a little dock in the near background just balances everything pitch perfect. The skin tones deserve a lecture, but I'll just say they're fantastic. All these darks collected into one luminous shape. Wow. That's something I'm always trying to do with not always that much success. Beautifully done. A Chevy van, very straightforward, by Joseph Santos. Yes, and when you say something straightforward, you almost imply it's simple. And when something is pared down and there are very few elements, you can say it's simple, and maybe it is, but I know firsthand that the fewer elements you put in a painting, it means the better each of those elements has to be for everything to work. When I look at my old work, I critique it by saying there's just too much going on. I threw too many techniques at it. I think with time and skill comes the ability to edit what's not necessary away. And look what he's done here. The beautiful, nearly unpainted, I think the white of the van is the thing that really won me over here, because the toned elements, the blues, the subtle browns, the rust indicated, it's just glorious. And then the bits that are in pure light, it all is so masterfully done. The grill work, the shadows behind it, the headlights, etc. Again, and then the cropping, gosh. The square cropping, of course, stops the energy from flowing out of the painting and keeps it centered. So that is so well done. Lizzie Day Dreaming by Shelley. Forgive me, I'm probably going to mangle your name. Skoropinski Supple. Basically, what's got me here was just the artist's capture of the mood you can imagine, the atmosphere, the emotion you can imagine this girl is having. She really does look like she's daydreaming. The pose is beautifully captured, the skin tones, the light, the subtle colors cascading over the figure and merging into the well-worn armchair behind. Really clever, really masterful, beautiful painting. Behind the Museum by Richard Sneary. I know his work pretty well, and one thing he can do is a lesson for all of us, is find beauty where you may not see it. I'm always saying that everything that's beautiful is not necessarily pretty. And Richard has a way of finding these out of the way compositions in places some of us might just walk by and ignore. but just these clever compositions of representational items, a stack of lumber, some boats upside down or right side up, little trolleys and utility sheds, all working together in this amazing and unexpected composition. I just love his work. It's every painting I see of his just gets better and better. Jane Stoddard. I can't even say the name, I apologize. Skajakwada. Please write me and tell me how I've mangled that. You could say this is a very straightforward portrait of the prow of two sailing boats. And yes, it is. But there's nothing pedestrian or simple about this because of her skill. First of all, the vertical composition, the cropping is just so it's so wizardly done. It helps you, brings you right in. It makes you flesh out the boats that are beyond the canvas. It sets up a dialogue, most importantly, I think, between the vessels themselves and the water to which they are so attached by definition. And then the way she did the water behind, and the way she's painted the boats, of course, is masterful and beautiful. But I know we're running low on time, so I'm going to just quickly mention her handling of water is spectacular. The gradations from the deeper saturated greens to almost nothing at the bottom, and then mirrored again in the reflections. Quite amazing. Just beautiful portrait by Philip Zhang, titled In Thought. Again, a portrait, the background of a portrait can really sink a portrait. Here it is strong and a bit saturated here and there, but it works because it makes the face, the light on the face, and then secondarily on the fabric come alive and pop out. Were the background more subtle, that would not have worked, of course. Just a beautiful sense of light, skin tones, textures on the hair, the looseness, this dialogue between control and looseness she's used both in the background and on the fabric, all help focus the painting right where you want it to go, on the light on his amazing face. A very somewhat controlled painting by David Van Galen, Green, Burgundy, and Meursault, but yet it works here because it sets a mood, it sets a tone of quiet, calm contentment in this beautiful pastoral landscape. So, you know, I think in a more aggressive attack, a more aggressive approach might have worked, but I don't think it would have worked as well. So my hats off, if I had one, to the artist for choosing the colors, the brushwork, everything, all orchestrated to suit the mood that I'm pretty sure he was after in this painting. Very different by the great Eric Weigart. It's another sort of pastoral landscape scene, title Morning, but his attack, I mean, he's famous for his attack. His brushwork is aggressive, and it's all so deceptively difficult to do this, to make it tie together and work. He's a guy that allows the medium to have its own expression and to have the smarts and the skill to put a brush mark down and to just leave it and let it speak for itself and not noodle around a lot with it and overwork it in any way. So his work sometimes can seem simpler than it really is. There's a lifetime of skill and work that goes behind this. I'm so sorry we're running low on time because I could go on and on about this. Glass Shadows Interplay by Sandy Winfrey. And yeah, that it is. The shadows cast from these glass objects is, of course, the star of the show, as the title implies. And look at the depth, transparency, color gradations, and changes she's got. Yeah, it's all very representational, and yet the whole painting reads cleverly as this beautiful abstract. And the choice to not paint the background at all, but to just keep it very graphic was, I believe, the correct one. Wu Xian is an artist I've become aware of on Instagram the last year or so. Just does phenomenal urban scenes. He's emerging as one of the really great urban painters. Cafe by the Canal is an example. They're detailed, they're architectural, you could say, but when you really look at them, the attack, again, the freshness, the lack of being overworked, the confidence of his brushwork, and the orchestration of the control and the lack of control is really quite stunning. New Year's Eve by Lin Zhu. Much control here, but it works because what I think she's going after is a much more fantastical, mystical sense. That said, all the control in the foreground, even though the background is a little bit explicit, she's masterfully faded out some of the elements, the edges. There's crisp edges in the foreground contrasted with the softer edges beyond. Really amazing work. Sus Chiang Tan, The Night. I love this artist's work. He's, again, he paints. I'm always encouraging people, my classes, to not paint things, but to paint the experience of that thing. So there is some hint of representation in his work and in this, but it's so abstracted and so boiled down to the energies that he sees, the energies bubbling up between the neutrals, the darks, the lights, and his brushwork is just astounding. It could just be chaos if you weren't so skilled, but all of this ties together so well. He won one of my jurors' commendations, and rightly so. Another juror's commendation was Kai Jung Wang, Passion at the Fishing Port. Very different kind of painting. It looks chaotic because everything is rather explicitly articulated. However, in amongst all the chaos is this really beautiful orchestration of lights and darks, shades and shadows. Without that knowledge and that skill, this whole thing could have fallen apart in just a mess of disparate pieces. I wouldn't have the whatever it would take to tackle a subject like this. The cropping, the elongated format, all these beautiful shapes, just an amazing bit of work, so well orchestrated. Under the Seven, this is by Giovanni Balzarini. This is a very explicit work, and you could say, well, no, I wouldn't say it's too tight. I would say what he's done is orchestrated control and lack of control with the textures, with the bits of running together of paint within these large surfaces of metal, the indications of rust and timing, beautiful gradation of distance by fading out the values lighter in the distance and much more saturated and clear in the foreground. Not easy at all to do. I admire this, and the amount of saved white is something, again, I would say to myself, damn, I wished I'd thought of that. Very cleverly done painting. I could go on and on about this, but it's gorgeous. And I think the clarity that he's chosen to use is appropriate to this kind of construction, architectural, structural subject matter. So anyway, hats off to him. This won the NWWS award. Kate Aubrey, another goodbye. This is the Airfloat Systems Award. A portrait, obviously. There's so much I could say about this. So sorry for the timing. The skin tones, the lighting, the brilliant background that complements the mood of the facial construction so well. Everything has this beautiful, contemplative, thoughtful mood to it. Her backlighting of the face is so beautiful. I think the elongated horizontal format deserves special mention because it wouldn't necessarily work had she not done such an amazing background, which I think allows the subject space. You can see her looking off into the distance and thinking about something. And the choice of cropping it in the way she did allows the viewer to wonder what she's thinking about, remembering, or believing. And therefore it sets up this dialogue and this communication between viewer, subject, and artist that rises any work above the norm. Brenda Swenson, oh, she's such a champ. Some Like It Hot. A very straightforward, you could say, portrayal of chili peppers. But what's unusual about this is that it really isn't straightforward because of her cropping, because of the angle of everything, because of the energies she's managed to portray here, all of the decisions she's made, the angles of the basket, the chaotic arrangement of the peppers in the basket, the high contrast of darks and lights, and the high complements of greens and reds primarily, and blues and oranges secondarily, all to me added an energy that seemed appropriate to the subject matter and raised it way above the average. It's such a beautiful expert level painting. And this was the Royal and Langnickel Award winner.
Hey, Tom, I'd like to tell you, take the time on these that you want to take. These are our award winners.
I know, but I just realized
We're running a little bit late, but these are our award winners. Don't make yourself frustrated, okay?
Yeah, thank you for that. That helps. This painting by Ian Stewart. Let's see, it has won. The top of my screen's cut off, so I can't see which award I gave Ian.
It's the Bill Hook and Christy Galindo Dyson Award.
Oh, well, that's appropriate. Yeah, Ian's an amazing painter, a great guy, as many of you know. This painting is what I call a jump off the cliff painting. It shouldn't work. It really shouldn't, but it does. He's had the gumption to split the painting almost right down the center, to put the horizon off the horizon, to tilt it, to make it a purposefully off kilter and purposefully, if I can say this, incorrect compositionally, because it works. And because of that, it is correct. What you get is the story of what it feels like to take off in a small plane and go into this steep rise that you have to do when you're going to otherwise run into a mountain. I got my pilot's license when I was much younger, and I love flying. So I know that feeling, and not that Ian had any knowledge of that, but this captures that feeling, that off-centered, off-kilter, out of balance sense. All that said, the way he composed the work, the darks versus the light, the saved whites and the buildings beyond, and then the runway, the beautiful textures he put into the foreground, and the beautiful treatment of the background, the skillful simplicity of the sky. It really, I don't know, I just absolutely adore this painting. Everything works together to tell the story and to set the mood that the artist intended, I believe. I haven't talked to Ian about this, but I want to when this is over, because I wondered what he was going for. So I'm just imagining that's what he was thinking. This is the Holbein Award, Machine Head by Pat Masuak. I just cannot say enough about the ability to compose abstract shapes in such a skillful way. Darks, lights, energies that go this way and that. In this case, primarily horizontal and then offset secondarily, I think, with vertical. And then this, the round and the diagonals. Really, really skillful stuff happening. Textures happening, positive, negative shapes, beautiful toggling again between sort of subtle warms and subtle cools, and then the values particularly got me in this painting. The white whites and the dark darks, where they do you the most good, were so beautifully and cleverly arranged. This painting by Peter Jablokov, Bridges at Sunset 2, was the Cheap Joe's art winner. I know Peter's work too. I'm a bit in awe of it. He paints these industrial landscapes somewhat like this regularly, but what makes him stand apart, I think, are the textures he uses. It rises them above their kind of heavy industrial nature, gives them a lightness, a lyricism, and a narrative that they might not otherwise have. They're very realistic things, but all of his paintings, this one, I think more than many I've seen, work at an abstract level to set up all, again, these diagonal energies, beautiful sense of perspective and depth. Sorry, Peter. And an incredible use of color that is admirable. The warms and cools, the textures he's worked into these, what otherwise might just be rusty elements. I don't even know how he does this. I don't know what his technique is. I'm kind of dying to find out. But yeah, the energies, the dialogues between darks and lights, and using realistic elements to create an abstract painting are especially admirable. The great Chris Krupinski. Cup of Lemon is this still life of hers. Most of you, I'm sure, know her and know her work. I know Chris not as well as I would like. She's going to be on my program being interviewed. I've got a course on terracotta, and she's going to be my next live interview. So I'm dying to take a deeper dive into her technique. I do know for a fact that this kind of painting is not so simple. You don't just take a photograph and copy it. It takes a great deal of pre-thought, planning, editing, composition, and study for the effect of lights. Her light is master level. Even just this bit at the lower left, that light on the skin of the lemon, looks so simple and straightforward, but it isn't. That is so hard to achieve, I am sure. Even more so inside the cup, that bounce light on the shade side of the back of the cup just makes me want to cry. It's so skillful and beautiful. All that said, if you back all up from all the technical expertise here, the warms, the bright warms of the yellows and the shadow sides of the yellows in dialogue with the shadows on the blue tablecloth in particular, set up that complementary dialogue that really makes the painting hang together in an abstract way, even though it is utterly realistic. So it's kind of breathtaking work she does. This painting I adore too. It's again a painting I wouldn't really even know how to tackle. This is Mr. Tambourine Mark by Susanna Spann, and it's the M. Graham Award winner. This again flies into the face of a lot of things I teach about establishing depth. This doesn't do that, not because necessarily she thinks that's wrong or doesn't know how to do it. It's a different approach. It's a different way to paint and just as valid. It's a more abstract way in that she uses the entire surface of the canvas. Every element is just about as important as every other. I think that is so difficult because to make that work, you have to then orchestrate the interest more carefully to center around, in this case, the singer's face and microphone. And it all does work. These incredibly beautiful saturated colors are very clever. She uses them as values just as much as color. Also a difficult thing to do. But for me, what happens here is the sense I get. The whole painting, I think, is purposefully tilted. Everything is a little off axis. The verticals aren't vertical. The horizontals are slightly angled, somewhat similar to what Ian did in his painting, but in this case for a different reason and a little bit more exaggeratedly so. And by doing so, what she does is establishes, I think that was a purposeful choice to establish a kind of sense of vibrancy and joy that wouldn't be there if it were more typically framed or oriented. And so in doing so, you can almost hear the music. You can almost hear him sing. It really is a painting of an experience, which I think is the greatest thing an artist can do. Don't paint a thing, but try to paint an experience. If you can manage that, you are doing something special. Couldn't be more different. Matthew Bird's Cherry Blossoms. I, again, am in awe of this kind of work because I don't do it and don't even understand quite the level of skill it takes. It's, this is beyond realism, I think. It goes into an area of beyond hyperrealism even. It's almost like a dream state. Still, again, Mark, I know, doesn't just photograph something and copy it. There's a great deal of thought that goes into this, to composing the darks, the lights, the colors, the beautiful reds and pinks that bounce off the reds, but all to set the right mood, the right tone, the right atmosphere. Every little element of this painting you could just point to and say, good grief, look at that. And yet it doesn't separate, it doesn't segment. Everything ties together to uphold the artist's intent, which of course is the cherry blossoms. So this one single blossom lying on the wood surface here is really in dialogue with the others. I think had he not included that, it would still be a great painting, but it wouldn't be the amazing painting that I think it is, to have won the Daniel Smith Premier Award. I think the choice to do that one lone blossom having fallen off the stem tells a different story, sets a mood, and gets me, the viewer, to feel something that I might not if it was just a straight ahead photorealistic image. It has an emotion, it has a story behind it that I can only wonder about. Beyond all that, there's so much technical expertise, the way the corner of the table is handled, the way the vase, the muted colors, the crack in the terracotta. It's just kind of breathtaking. And yet all of that takes a back seat, I think, for me, to the narration set up between these blossoms and the one lonely one sitting down there on the table. Well, when it comes to skill, Zhao Tiana is a genuine master watercolor. He's been around a long time, painted for a long time, and it shows. His painting, Tazak Woman, is, I have it here. It's the HQ, the Johnson Award winner. There's so much discretion here, and it looks so deceptively simple. Of course, it's not. He makes it look easy. Of course, it's not. I paint portraits. I would say I'm not bad at it. I look at a painting like this and say I shouldn't bother, because the sophistication of his skin tones, the treatment of, I get obsessed with the treatment of a mouth, the coloration of the teeth, the eyes, of course, but the folds in the skin, the way to get the architecture of the skull to turn around and to stay luminous even in the dark shades, the treatment of the background, the treatment of the fabrics, the hair, all of that could have been done in a way that would detract from the overall effect, but doesn't. Everything, again, is orchestrated to tell the story of this woman's face and whatever she's thinking, looking at, or feeling. It's really quite remarkable. The intensity, but the really subtle gradations between intensity and subtlety, between light and dark. Yeah, I'm a bit in awe of this kind of skill. If you guys don't know his work, well, I don't know, you probably do, but you should get to know it. He's an amazing artist, great guy too. I looked and looked at this painting. I adored it for a lot of reasons. I thought there were things in this painting that maybe should not have won me over, but that did win me over. And I think it is, had it just been a straight ahead portrait of her face, it would not been quite as successful as it would have been with this energetic background. I've referenced many times the last couple of hours, backgrounds in portraits. They're every bit as important as the actual face, but you have to design them to be consistent with the mood of the story the face is trying to tell, or you, the artist, are trying to get across. So the energy and subtlety, the off tones of the greens in the background bouncing off her beautiful red hair and the warm tones of her lips and skin work in a way that might not have had, well, this is Galena Richardson, title is Under Her Wing, might not have so well had Galena not been so skillful. I think it's a great title too, because you do get a sense that there's a bird-like quality and a wing-like quality to the background, with the very realistic face orchestrated beautifully with the abstract shapes and fluidity of the background. Wow, did I struggle over, I struggled over every painting in this show. I could make a beautiful show out of 75 paintings that didn't get included. But when it came to the top awards, I really was up against it. All I can say here is this is an abstract, obviously, Riding the Wave by Linda Hoffman Snodgrass. Every round I went through in trying to jury this show, and I probably was about 12 or 13, this painting kept rising to my save pile time and time and time again. I don't know that I'm even fully capable to tell you what's so great about it, but I'll just tell you as a painter, a fellow painter and artist, and as a human, what I loved. And it was the sense of life and energy. It's so beautifully watercolor too. The luminosity, the transparency used, the variety of edges, the found and the beautiful wet and wet lost edges, the overriding sense of blue versus orange. Of course, that complement gave it an energy. And then of course the shapes, the brush marks, the circular brush marks where she purposefully put the brush down and where I think just beautiful, happy accidents occurred. I just can't say enough about it. It just kept coming back and back to me as a painting I simply loved. And when you're a juror, you can analyze, you can make yourself a checklist of things you need to look for, and I did. But beyond that, there's always some other little element you have to look for. That's something extra, that it quality that may be subjective. And in this case, it may be subjective, but I simply love this painting. It made me feel a million different emotions at once. It felt chaotic, it felt joyful, it felt thoughtful, it felt exploratory, it felt angry, and it felt happy. It was just filled with emotion and joy. And I don't know, at the end of the day, what more can you want from a painting than to fill your viewer with emotions that he or she may not have felt before they experienced your painting. And when I talk about paintings as an experience, wow, this painting is that and something else. I just loved it. So this was my third place award winning painting, Riding the Wave by Linda Hoffman Snodgrass. Fishing Port by Qianqin Ji, I gave my second place award to. And again, gosh, I hemmed and I hawed and I lost sleep and hair over trying to decide which to choose. This painting, again, just kept rising up in my ranks as one that's just so admirable. To explain why, I think it is the contrast of what is there and what is not there, between solidity and volume and negativity. The discretion of the sky and the water that are literally not touched or almost not touched at all could have a book written about them. The busyness with which the boats are depicted and rendered would not be so successful were it not for the discretion and the emptiness of the sky and the water below. So on a painting technical level, that works beautifully, but in a way where the painter is trying to tell a story or establish a mood, what could work better than that? You could just feel yourself standing there. You could smell the water. You could feel the fog in the air almost. Everything about this painting to me didn't scream, it whispered experience. I could just feel myself there. If the last painting was a shout, this painting was a whisper. It's just gloriously, intelligently done, with an understanding of when detail works for you and when it's not necessary. I am filled with admiration for this painter. So beautifully done. Well, last but not least, I don't know that I had a harder decision than to choose a first place award winner, but ultimately I did. And ultimately it went to Without Reason by Lance Hunter. And there are a million technical reasons I can tell you. I'll rattle them off as quickly as I can. The beautiful elongated vertical format, I thought, was an artistic decision that helped. Well, again, everything he chose to do, the delineation of the background being a little busier than many of the others, I thought in this case was absolute right thing to do, because what that helped do was to help further illuminate the beautiful skin tones, that translucent skin, and the beautiful drapery in her gown she's wearing. I mean, this is so reminiscent of the paintings of Soroyo and the cropping of the Pre-Raphaelites but yet it doesn't feel historic or a callback. It feels very modern and very up to date. I am filled with admiration for this painting. It stands out for 1,000 reasons. The drapery alone is worth hours of study. The warms, the cools, the way you can just see her skin tones through the thin fabric, shadowing. The drapery is so cleverly done. The uplighting, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Nothing is overdone. It is a busy painting in a sense, and yet it has an overall calm mood. Last but not least, it's a portrait, of course, even though it's a full figure. The look on her face just makes you gasp. The reflected light under her chin, on the neck. She's thinking, feeling something. Very few paintings in the show grabbed me the way this one did and made me wonder, what's going on with her? What is she thinking? What is she talking about? I looked at this painting so often, I felt as if I knew her. Of course I don't. But it did do that thing that I need a successful painting to do, which is to bring me into the painter's world and make me feel a part of his process and wonder what he as a painter was thinking and what she as a subject was thinking and feeling. And to me, that's the highest compliment I can pay a painter or a painting, if they make me as a viewer part of their process. So ultimately, I think this is a very worthy first place winner. I'm so honored to have been asked to jury this show. It was so difficult. Gosh, thank you, guys. I know I've run over time, but I appreciate your attention.
Well, Thomas, it was just wonderful. Could you, if you could move on to the next slide, what I'd like to do is thank our sponsors. I mean, I can't say enough about Daniel Smith and how long they've been our Platinum Plus sponsor and what they've done for us. It's just been magnificent what they've been to us over the years. And Cheap Joe's and Holbein and M. Graham and everyone else, Bill Hook and Christy Galindo Dyson donated, and all of the other donors down at the bottom of the list. So please, all of you who are painters and have watched this presentation tonight, keep in mind that we could not even have these shows without these donors. And if you can patronize them, that would be a wonderful thing to do. You know, use them as your suppliers and the people that you buy from. And Peggy, how about you? Do you have any chat questions or anything like that of Thomas that you'd like to ask?
There were not a lot of questions. There was a lot of wonderful comments about all of it, and thanking him. Great work and great artwork. So no, there was not a lot of questions, but thank you all.
Okay. Well, Thomas, you have a way with words.
Oh,
better than any other juror that we have ever had. You bring every painting to life with your expression and your choice of words. I mean, I took notes after notes after notes of things that you said because they're just so valuable. And you made every painting even more special than it ever had been before. So thank you so much. And don't worry about running over time. We're only 20 minutes past. It's worth it.
well,
Totally.
thank you for that. I could have gone on and on. I loved each and every one of these paintings and could have talked for an hour on just about each one. So it was really an honor, a lot of work, but I liked it. And I'm just honored you asked me, and I'm so glad to be part of this community. You're a big deal to me as an artist, but as a person too. So just very happy to be a part of this group.
Well, thank you, Thomas. We love having you. We love having anything to do with you.
Okay.
And I would like to
I hope you get a chance, Thomas, to look at some of the comments because there's some wonderful comments and thank yous in the chat.
Oh, yeah.
I'll send you the chat file, Thomas.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and thank you to all who viewed in and took the time to listen to me yammer on and on for 2.5 hours. But I appreciate it. And I'll see some of you, I guess, on Monday in my workshop. So that'll
Yes,
be
you
fun.
will.
And
You-
Tuesday night at the general meeting as well.
Correct. We have over 300 people signed up for Tuesday night.
Good grief.
Yeah.
I better do something good.
And for those of you who don't know, Thomas's workshop filled up in 5 hours. So yeah, we're lucky to have him participate with us this year. So one thing I'd like to mention is that the gallery of all of these images will be online. It'll be posted in the next day or two, and you'll be able to see it on our website. Just go to the exhibitions page for the International Open, and that's where you'll see it. You'll need to be logged into the website to see it, but that's an easy thing to do. So just log in and the gallery will be there. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Is there anything else that I've forgotten? Peggy, can you think of anything else? How about you, Mike? Is there anything?
Well,
Purchases?
the gallery will be up through January 4th, so over the holidays as well. So
That's right. That's right. And all of these paintings are for sale, and all of that will be posted in the gallery. So send your friends and family so they can take a look at this gorgeous body of work. All right. Anything, Peggy?
I saw in the chat that it's already online.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, so Jody was doing her job.
Yeah, we have a great webmaster.
She always does.
All right, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. It's always fun, and it is a gorgeous show. And to every artist who entered, thank you so much. You support Northwest Watercolor Society with every entry that you submit. So,
and also to our members, this is going to be available to them to view, correct?
correct.
Yep.
Correct. But I think it's the reception, and I think the reception is going to be available to the general public, and it will also be on our public YouTube page. So this is a reception. This is not a demo. The demo is private to members, but the receptions are open to the public. All right. Okay, everybody, thank you very much, and hope to see you Tuesday night at the general meeting. And thank you, Thomas. Have fun in the workshop.
Thank you guys so much.
All right.
See you
Good
soon.
night. Good night,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Good night.